What if the most dangerous planet in the galaxy wasn't feared for its monsters, but for its people? When alien students study Earth, they expect chaos, storms, and predators. But what truly shocks them is humanity's refusal to break. 1. Question sparks a journey across worlds where fear meets courage and survival becomes a mindset. This isn't just a story about humans, it's about what happens when other species learn to think like them. Ready to find out what makes Earth's children unstoppable? Let's begin. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move toward this wonderful story. Professor Laren Voss always enjoyed the puzzled expressions aliens made when talking about humans. In a galaxy full of creatures with claws, shells, and psychic shields, humans still somehow stood out, and not in the way anyone expected. Today, like many others, the question came during one of his advanced xenobiology classes at the YAO, Interstellar Biology Institute. The classroom shimmered with artificial light and alien adaptations, floating chairs, aquatic pods, filtered air pockets, and yet the moment still felt completely human. The question came from Narelle, a water-dwelling student with glowing fins and eyes like molten silver. Her voice bubbled softly through the translator. Professor Voss, our research suggests humans continue to function even after reaching biological breaking points. Why do you not stop when all signs indicate you should? The room quieted. Even Juno, a gas-based being that usually vibrated with skepticism, paused its gentle pulsing. Drask, the crustacean-like student who insisted everything had a rational explanation, leaned forward in interest. The question itself wasn't new, but this time, something about the way it was asked struck deeper. It wasn't framed with confusion or judgment. It was curiosity, genuine, respectful, maybe even hopeful. Lauren smiled, leaning back against the edge of his desk. That's the question, isn't it? Why do humans keep going? He paused, letting the silence grow, letting anticipation build. In storytelling, timing mattered, and storytelling in this moment was more important than science. You see, he continued, most species in this room come from stable environments, predictable weather, logical threats. You evolve to manage those. But Earth, he chuckled, Earth throws curveballs. Every 100 years it reshuffles the deck. Fire, ice, disease, war, shifting climates, unpredictable predators, you name it. And so we didn't adapt to one thing. We adapted to change itself. Juno released a small burst of colorless mist. That is a poetic explanation, but not a scientific one. Lauren raised an eyebrow. You want science? Fine. We can talk about how our endurance mechanisms evolved from persistence hunting. We can discuss how our brains prioritize problem-solving over preservation, but I'll tell you something better. I'll show you. With a flick of his wrist, he activated the central holographic platform. Computer, initiate simulation. Earth, Survival Protocol 7. The classroom lights dimmed. The soft hum of the artificial environment shifted as the alien room transformed into a sprawling savanna. Hot wind brushed their skin. Yes, even the gaseous students had tactile sensors. The grass shimmered gold beneath a blinding sun. Far off, a plume of dark smoke curled into the sky. What you see here, Lauren explained, is a simulation all human children experience by the age of 10. It's called a wildfire drill. The goal? Stay alive. A murmur ran through the class. 10? For many species here, 10 was still considered infancy. The smoke on the horizon darkened. The wind picked up. The heat grew oppressive. Some students adjusted their environmental shields. Narelle coiled her translucent body in discomfort. Drask clacked his mandibles. This seems unnecessarily cruel. Lauren grinned. To you, maybe. But it's not cruelty, it's preparation. The fire began to advance. It moved fast, too fast for comfort. Heat shimmered in the air and some students began to panic. One of them triggered a personal defensive protocol, releasing a quick burst of foam. Lauren raised his hand. Pause. Simulation. The fire froze mid-roar. Flames locked in place just meters from the front row. You feel that? He asked. That spike of fear? That moment when your instincts scream to run, hide, give up? He stepped right into the edge of the frozen flame. That's where human resilience lives. Not before, not after. Right in that moment. We don't ignore fear. We just refuse to let it make decisions for us. Juno drifted slightly closer, its sensors flickering with interest. You said human children experience this? All of them, Lauren confirmed. Because learning to respond instead of react is a survival skill. We can't afford to panic. Earth taught us early that fear doesn't stop fire. Action does. Narelle's fins glowed a gentle yellow, a color that usually meant deep contemplation. So your strength is not physical? Not even close, Lauren said with a chuckle. Compared to most of you, we're squishy, slow, and half-blind. But we do one thing exceptionally well. We adapt. We problem-solve. And more than anything else, we persist. Drask clicked thoughtfully. So what you're suggesting is that the human evolutionary advantage is psychological? Lauren nodded. Exactly. It's not in the body, it's in the mindset. He deactivated the simulation, and the classroom returned to its usual array of high-tech comforts and alien adaptations. The fire, the wind, the pressure, it all vanished. But the feeling lingered. That, he said softly, is why we keep going. Not because we don't feel pain, not because we enjoy danger, but because deep down, we believe that every problem has a solution, even when we haven't found it yet. A silence settled over the room, not the awkward kind, but the powerful kind, the kind that follows realization. In the back, Narelle raised a hand again. Professor, would it be possible to experience a full simulation? Not as observers, but participants? Lauren blinked. Then slowly, a smile spread across his face. That, he said, is the question that just changed everything. The other. Air on Varnock 3 was thin and sharp like a knife made of ice and sand. Even through their suits, the students felt its bite. The planet's sky shifted between violet and burnt orange, painting everything in eerie colors. Professor Laren Voss stood at the edge of the landing platform, arms crossed, watching his group of alien students fumble with their equipment. It had only been a few days since the wildfire simulation back at the Interstellar Biology Institute, but everything had changed. These students had asked to go further, to feel what humans face on death worlds. So now, here they were, on one of the most hostile planets the Academy dared to train on. Syrah, a winged creature from the high-altitude cities of Aurelis, struggled to fold her delicate wings inside her protective suit. This gear is made for creatures with arms, she muttered through her translator. Kevar, a quiet student from a low-gravity moon, was crouched nearby, carefully adjusting a robotic brace to help him walk in the planet's crushing gravity. Beside him, Ilyo floated gently in a low hover field. Ilyo's species had no bones, just a flexible internal structure and a deep fascination with language. He was here to study emotional responses, but even he looked tense as the training began. First rule of survival school, Voss said loudly, making sure they could all hear him through the storm suits. You don't wait for comfort, you create it. They were surrounded by jagged rocks and hills that hummed faintly with magnetic interference. The only shelter was a series of makeshift domes they had to build themselves. The training scenario was simple. Establish a base, locate water sources, and survive the next 48 hours. That simplicity, of course, was a lie. Varnock 3 had unexpected storms, violent quakes, and temperatures that changed so fast they made equipment cry. As they started building camp, Kevar's brace snapped under pressure. He collapsed to the ground with a gasp. Syrah immediately rushed over, wings twitching behind her back. Are you hurt? No, Kevar grunted, pushing himself upright. Just frustrated. He held up the broken brace. Everything I make falls apart. Lauren knelt beside him. That's part of the process. Human engineers fail 100 times before something works. Fix it, then test it, then fix it again. Keever gave him a long look, then nodded and began working again, this time using extra reinforcement around the joint. Across the rocky field, Elio tapped on his communicator. "Professor, we're detecting seismic activity in the western ridge. Should we relocate?" Lauren checked his own scanner. "No, but mark it. This region trembles often but rarely cracks. If it does, you'll learn how to deal with that too." The next few hours were spent setting up the habitat domes. The air grew colder. The wind picked up. Several students complained about joint stiffness and communication glitches. Varnock 3 wasn't dangerous in the way Earth was. It didn't have monsters or volcanoes. It had something worse, wearing pressure. The kind of environment that slowly pushed you to give up. By nightfall, the domes were standing. They weren't perfect, but they worked. The team gathered around a central heater in the main shelter, suits half unzipped and eyes tired. Lauren passed around hydration tubes and nutrient bars. "Welcome to a death world," he said with a grin. Sira leaned forward. "This isn't like the simulation. It's harder." "It's real," Lauren agreed. "There's no pause button here." Tremor rolled through the ground beneath them. Just a small one, but enough to make the heater flicker and the students go still. "That's not comforting," muttered Elio. "Comfort's a reward," Lauren said. "Survival is the lesson." Later that night, alarms blared. A storm front was approaching fast. Magnetic fields disrupted their comms. One of the domes, Sira's personal habitat, collapsed under pressure from the wind. Lauren and 2 students scrambled outside to recover her gear. Kavar, using his newly reinforced brace, helped stabilize the walls of the remaining dome. Elio managed to boost the comm signal using part of his translation device. It was chaos. But no one gave up. They adjusted, repaired, worked together. When morning came, the storm had passed. The sky was clear, painted in soft purples. The group was exhausted but alive. They gathered again around the heater, this time with real pride in their eyes. "I couldn't have done this yesterday," said Kavar, flexing his mechanical brace. "You couldn't have done it without failing first," Voss replied. Sira looked down at the dust-coated remains of her personal dome. "I thought I was prepared. But this," she paused. "This showed me how much more there is to learn." "That's what humans figured out a long time ago," Voss said. "You never stop learning. You never stop adapting." Elio floated closer. "I documented 47 different emotional responses during the storm. I also noticed something else. We didn't panic." Lauren nodded. "That's the lesson. You felt fear, but fear isn't failure. Panic is. The difference is in training, the mind to act, even when the heart races." Sira tilted her head. "How did your people learn this?" "By failing," Lauren said simply. "By losing, falling, breaking, and choosing to try again anyway." The students fell into a thoughtful silence, not the kind that comes from fatigue, but from realization. In that moment, Varnock 3 was no longer a test site. It was a teacher, and it had taught them something they'd never forget. Lauren Voss lay motionless in the medical dome, his body wrapped in cooling packs and his skin still red from heat exposure. The steady beeping of monitors was the only sound in the room, aside from the occasional hiss of the oxygen system. Around him stood 3 of his students, Sira, Kavar, and Elio, staring at their unconscious professor with wide, worried eyes. None of them had spoken since the emergency response team had dragged him out of the collapsed maintenance tunnel the night before. His survival had been uncertain for hours. Now, though, his breathing had stabilized. His vitals were holding, but the mood in the room was far from relieved. Sira paced at the foot of the bed, her wings tucked in tight. "He shouldn't have gone in there," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. That tunnel was already compromised. The temperature was rising too fast. He knew that. He also knew the coolant system was failing, Kavar replied, adjusting the tool belt that never seemed to leave his side. If he hadn't restored it, the containment field would have collapsed. The Arlians in the dome would have died. But he nearly died too. Elio added softly, "Is that the human way?" Sacrifice first, think later? Kavar shook his head. No. It's more like they think while they sacrifice. The door to the medical dome opened, and a technician nodded at the students. You can talk to him. Now he's awake. Sierra was the first to move, stepping up to Voss's bedside as his eyes fluttered open. You're awake, she breathed. Lauren gave a weak smile. That seems to be the case. Though I feel like I've been roasted inside a tin can. Keever stepped forward next. Professor, you shouldn't have gone in there. I had to, Voss replied, his voice hoarse. The coolant system was failing. I was the only one with gear rated high enough for the temperature, barely. You almost didn't make it back, Elio said. We thought we lost you. Lauren nodded slowly. So did I. But when I heard your voices on the comms, working together, building a solution while I was trapped, that's what kept me going. The 3 students looked at one another. It had been chaotic. Kavar had repurposed drone parts to build an emergency cooling extension. Sierra had crawled into a backup access port to relay coordinates. Elio had patched communications using pieces of his translator. They had done what they never imagined possible. You taught us to adapt, Sierra said after a moment. But this wasn't training. This was real. And it was terrifying. That's the point, Voss said. It's easy to be brave in a simulation. It's when things fall apart that you find out who you really are. Kavar lowered his eyes. We kept asking why humans do what they do. I think now we understand. It's not just instinct, it's choice. Elio stepped closer. But still, you chose to risk your life for others. Doesn't that scare you? Lauren let out a dry chuckle. Every time. But fear is part of being alive. The trick is to act anyway. There was a knock on the door, and then the dome's entry curtain swept open. A stern figure entered, Director Halen, the Academy's lead on field training programs. He looked from Voss to the students, then spoke in a clipped voice. Professor Voss, as of this moment, you are officially relieved of field duties pending a full review. This expedition was not authorized for direct instructor involvement in life-threatening repairs. Understood, Lauren said, still lying. Flat. The fact that you survived does not excuse the risk, Halen continued, nor does it justify turning a survival course into a near-death experience. Before Voss could answer, Sierra stepped forward. Director, if I may. He blinked at her. Yes? It wasn't just a course anymore. When the emergency hit, we remembered what Professor Voss taught us. We didn't panic, we didn't freeze, we solved the problem. Not because we had the answers, because we believed we could find them. That belief came from him. Kavar nodded. We didn't copy human behavior. We made it our own. Elio lifted his translator. Adaptability is not just a trait. It's a choice. That's what he gave us. Halen looked at them for a long time, then turned back to Voss. Your students defended you better than your record ever could. They're right. You didn't just teach them how to survive. You helped them think like survivors. Voss smiled faintly. It's a habit. Outside the dome, the storm had passed. The ground was cracked but stable. The training dome still stood, some dented, some scorched, but all intact. A few other students were working already, reinforcing the foundations and updating structural protocols. Lauren shifted in bed, wincing. I'll be fine. Give me 2 days and I'll be back. Out there. No, you won't, Helen said firmly. You're staying in recovery, but... He hesitated, then added, You're being recommended for a new role. One that keeps you alive but lets your influence reach further. Voss raised an eyebrow. Sounds suspiciously like a promotion. It is, Holland said. You're going to help design the next phase of cross-species survival training. What you started here? It's just the beginning. As the students filed out one by one, they glanced back at Voss. He gave a tired but proud smile. They had learned the lesson in the fire. Not just about surviving heat, storms, or broken systems, but about rising when everything told them to fall. That, more than anything, was the human gift. and now it belonged to more than just humans. The council chamber was colder than necessary, lit with soft blues and pale silver, as if the designers wanted to freeze both temperature and emotion. Lauren Voss sat at the far end of a long table, feeling oddly small despite having faced wildfires, vacuum breaches, and the occasional charging predator. But this was a different kind of pressure. Around him, representatives from more than a dozen species whispered among themselves, some clicking, some humming, some vibrating in ways only their own kind understood. These were the decision makers, the ones who would either end his program or expand it across the stars. Nirel sat to his left, her usually calm eyes flickering with quiet determination. Kavar was across from them, already sketching modifications to a survival pod on his data tablet, completely ignoring the formal setting. Ilyo hovered near the center of the table, gently adjusting the speakers on his translator. None of them were students anymore, not after what they'd done. They were researchers now, scientists in their own right, invited here to help reshape how the galaxy viewed resilience, adaptation, and the strange species called humans. Professor Voss, came a voice from the far end of the room, Elder Tereth of the Ventari, a jellyfish-like being with soft bioluminescence and a voice that sounded like rain tapping glass. You claim that adaptability can be taught, not inherited. Do you understand how radical that sounds to us? Lauren nodded. I do, but it's not a claim, it's a result. These students came to learn about human survival. What they found was their own. A low murmur spread through the room. The chair of the council, a tall, stoic being from a race known for their mechanical logic, tilted its head. You expose these students to life-threatening danger. For education? No, Nirel said suddenly, surprising even Lauren. He didn't expose us. We volunteered. We asked to go further. Because we realize that real learning doesn't happen when you're safe. It happens when you're unsure, and you decide to keep going anyway. Ilyo added, we weren't trained to think like humans. We were encouraged to think beyond what we thought possible. Kavar, still tapping on his tablet, finally looked up. And for the record, none of us nearly died. Not like he did. Lauren gave a small smile. Thank you, Kavar. Another voice chimed in. This one softer, less formal. A young council aide from the Uran species, known for their cautious culture. But how can this mindset be safe? Encouraging species to act outside their evolutionary instincts could cause harm. It could, Lauren agreed, but so can doing nothing. The galaxy is changing faster than it ever has. Colonies are expanding. Unknown worlds are being explored. We can't afford to rely only on instinct. We need training, we need mindset. There was silence again, this time deeper, more thoughtful. We've read the research paper, said the chair. It challenges long-held beliefs. It rewrites the foundation of interspecies adaptation models. It doesn't rewrite them, Ilyo said gently. It adds to them. Think of it as an upgrade, like a new software version for an old system. The council members leaned back, exchanging subtle nods and gestures. After a long moment, the chair spoke again. The Exploratory Division has requested training protocols based on your model. We are considering forming a new department for cross-species adaptive training. If approved, it would need leadership. Lauren glanced at his students. They already knew what was coming. I nominate Nirel, he said simply. She has the vision, the understanding, and the calm under pressure. She'll do more than I ever could. Nirel looked stunned for a moment, then recovered quickly. If accepted, I will serve, but I won't do it alone. Kavar grinned. She means us. Ilyo floated higher. We accept. And you, Professor Voss? The chair asked. What role would you play? He leaned back, finally relaxed. I'll advise. Maybe tell a few stories, and make sure they don't forget that it all started with one question. There was a pause. Then a soft flicker of light passed across the room, the council's signal of approval. Outside, the stars still shone the same as they always had, scattered across the dark like glitter on black velvet. But something was different now. Somewhere in the galaxy, a new kind of classroom was being prepared. One where survival wasn't about being the strongest or fastest, but about choosing to keep going, to think, to try, to fail, and try again. Months later, in a training dome orbiting a gas giant, a group of young alien cadets listened as their instructor played a clip of Lauren Voss speaking at the original wildfire simulation. "Why do humans keep going?" he asked in the recording, and then he smiled. "Because we believe no world has to stay unlivable forever." A young cadet, barely old enough to fly solo, raised a hand. "But we're not humans. How can we believe that?" From the back, Narelle, now director of adaptive programs, stepped forward. Her answer was simple. "Because we're not just learning from humans anymore. We're becoming something new. Together." And with that, the galaxy changed again. Quietly, steadily, beautifully.